All right, recording has started.
Excellent, thank you. So I expect Deborah will probably be joining us again here in a few minutes, but we have all of the commission members here. So I will go ahead and call us to order for the July 7th Audit and Finance Committee meeting for the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission. So first off, I want to say thank you for everybody for joining us today with the beautiful weather outside. Being stuck inside against the camera for a meeting isn't the best place to be, but we'll get through it. So a couple of opening remarks. Just a reminder that we are now recording the meeting and it is being live streamed on YouTube for the public viewing. So hello to everybody who is viewing us on there. Also, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, even though we are now in stage 3, we are still meeting virtually, and committee members are each within their respective homes and places of work for the duration of the recording. So again, thank you to all of those who have joined us today and to the members of public watching our live stream currently or later as the recording of the meeting. And with that, I'd like to move on to our land acknowledgement. So on behalf of the committee, we would like to acknowledge that the traditional land in which we are virtually gathered today is Treaty 6 territory. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous people whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as a home. So with that, we will move on. We have an agenda in front of us. I trust everybody has had the opportunity to review the agenda, and I will go to administration first to see if we have any adjustments to the agenda today.
No, sir.
Excellent, thank you very much. So with that, I will look for a motion from one of the committee members to adopt the July 7th, 2021 agenda as presented.
I so move.
Okay, I saw Chantel's hand go up first on that, so we'll give that one, no worries. We'll give that one to Chantel, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Excellent, and we'll call that carried. So next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for the May 6th regular committee meeting. So we have those minutes were in the agenda package that was distributed. I trust everybody has had an opportunity to review those minutes, and I am looking for any comments or questions or errors or omissions. Does anybody have anything they would like to bring up? Seeing none, I will call for a motion to adopt the committee meeting minutes as presented. And we'll get Ray on that one. Perfect. We'll call the question. All in favor? Excellent, and that is carried. Moving on to number 4 is the update on the EMTSC financial function stand-up, and this is an information item, and I will turn it over to CAO Jankowski for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before you, as part of the facilitation deck, you can see a summary of the actuals to budget comparison as of the end of June of this year. What you see are the broad categories into which we have categorized or grouped the various expenses that formed part of the approved budget that the board has passed. You can see from the breakdown that there were certain one-time and startup expenses in the top category, top grouping, that were approved by the board at the time of budget approval. And then there were the total recurring expenses that will effectively be the ongoing operating costs of the commission as we go forward. The top category is a category that as the organization evolves, as it matures, we will get to a point within a number of years where those startup costs will stop showing up separately, and we will get to a point where there are simply ongoing operating costs along with a corresponding capital budget that we will be bringing forward. But for the 2020 budget, the expenses have been grouped in those two categories. And when we look at the actuals as of the end of the second quarter, you can see that we're positioned fairly well this year. We've incurred a number of the one-time and startup expenses, most significantly in that last category of program delivery. And those were largely the costs, or are largely the costs of the ongoing support work that the firm of EY has provided to the board during the startup phase. There are also a number of other activities that are shown above that program delivery category. And you can see that other than that program delivery category, we're faring very well relative to the budget that was approved by the board at the beginning or at the outset of this year. Similarly, when we look at the total recurring expenses, we are positioned very well relative to the approved budget. And that is a reflection largely of what I'll say was kind of the late start of the regular, or the start of operations. I think the board recognizes that although originally we were anticipating, for example, that I would have started, or the CEO would have started earlier this year, than actually occurred. So there were funds in the budget for those purposes. We're trending well in those categories, and we are now starting to complete some of the legal agreements for things like technology licenses and services and so on. We expect, for example, to have the IT services contract executed this week or next week. So as we get through the third quarter, we will start incurring expenses in some of the categories that right now are showing very, very low expenses to the end of the second quarter. So all in all, good news. We're at this point, we're trending well. We shouldn't have a problem. We don't anticipate that we'll have a problem this year. And with that brief summary, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the comparison of budget to actuals to budget.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Any questions? Ray, I see you have one. Go ahead, please.
Just in regards to the program delivery, because we're pretty well at the max, the budget, where are we going to be? Because we have extended the agreement with our contract with them. So
thank you.
We have any idea what that's going to be? So sorry.
Yeah. So what we're proposing is that we will, the next time you see this, you will see a slight recalibration of the actual budget, because in the category, for example, below the incremental resourcing costs, that would have been, that's where the majority of the salaries of the new hires were originally budgeted. As you've seen, we've had some delays in terms of hiring the first number of staff people, and although there will be 2 staff people that will be starting next week and the week thereafter. In the original budget, there were some salary dollars that were allocated in the second quarter to the hiring and the ongoing payroll of some new hires. What we'll be doing is we'll be reallocating some of the costs, or some of the budget from the incremental resourcing costs, primarily in that category, to the program delivery costs. And in that way, we'll be offsetting the ongoing support costs that EY is providing, as was approved by the board at its last meeting and at the end of June. And we're confident that there is sufficient budget through this reallocation that we won't require additional funding overall.
Thank you very much. Will there be, like in the future, notes attached to this explaining those details when we do make those adjustments?
Certainly, we can make we can include a couple of asterisks and indicate the reprioritization or the reallocation of budget.
Okay, thank you. It's the only questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else for any questions or comments? Seeing none, I do have one. And so just in regards to the legal and professional expenses on the top line, and then the policy and legal expenses on the bottom line. So the we're at about 75% of budget already on the initial one-time startup expenses. Do we expect to be able to stay within that? And are we already transitioning now into the recurring policy and legal, or are we still going to need a sufficient amount of resources for the one-time stand-up legal and professional fees?
So to this point, almost all of the legal fees that we have paid have fallen into that category of one-time startup expenses. Most of the legal support has been, for example, in terms of the drafting of policies that both board approved policies as well as administrative policies. And those are costs that would be incurred, or we expect will be incurred once. In the lower category of policy and legal, yes, there will be some ongoing legal assistance that will be required for things like talent acquisition, executing contracts, those kinds of things, executing operational contracts, executing employment contracts. So there will be some ongoing costs in the policy and legal category that will form part of regular operating expenses. But the costs that have been incurred to date in that top category have all been associated with these one-time startup legal requirements. For example, the drafting of agreements with the City of St. Albert and the City of Edmonton relative to the guarantees that are required during the interim debt financed operating period that the board is overseeing over the first 2 or 3 years. Those costs will eventually disappear, and while we do anticipate that those ongoing policy and legal costs, as the organization matures, as it grows, the budget for that will grow in subsequent years. The top category will disappear. As to your question, Mr. Chair, with regards to are we doing okay relative to the one-time costs? Yes, at this point, we're anticipating that the bulk of, for example, the policy development work that that the board needed to approve, the bulk of that has taken place already. So the costs that we will be incurring in those categories as the third quarter and fourth quarter progresses, we do anticipate will be less than had been the case in the first and second quarter of this year. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4B, the guarantees line of credit status. So again, Mr. Jankowski.
So thank you. And here, Deborah has been involved extensively in terms of pursuing our guarantees and completing the discussions and negotiations with both the City of St. Albert and the City of Edmonton. And I'm very happy to report that although this slide shows that Edmonton and St. Albert have their second and third readings this week, I'm happy to report that as of Monday, the St. Albert Council has approved the guarantee, and we're now in the process of executing the paperwork around that. We are awaiting notification from the City of Edmonton that the second and third readings have been completed there, and that we anticipate the guarantee will be approved there. That will then allow us to finalize our loan documents with the TD Bank, and allow us to complete the preparations for the debt finance portion of the stand-up and the operations of the first few years of the commission. I'm also happy to report that as of last week, we did receive the ministerial approval, which we required under the Municipal Government Act for the debt limit extension. The committee might recall that a couple of months ago, we went forward and we requested the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs to a debt limit higher than what would normally be afforded to a board, to a commission such as ours. And late last week, we received the official notification, or the official paperwork from the Minister of Municipal Affairs indicating the approval of the debt limit extension. So we're now well positioned. We do expect to have the TD financing in place by mid-July, and that should wrap up that phase of the financial stand-up of the the commission. The one other thing that I might mention, Mr. Chair, is that in addition to kind of this background, this necessary work to actually secure the funding, Deborah has been very busy starting to put in place the processes for actually using that funding. So over the course of the last month, we have set up our banking provisions with the TD Bank. We've set up the bank accounts, and we've actually developed the payment processes to start processing the first payments for a lot of our the outstanding invoices that we had from our service providers. We've also set up the processes now to complete the payroll transactions as the organization moves forward. We've got everything in place to do that. Our human resources consultants of 6 Cents were instrumental in developing a payroll processing service or a payroll processing process. And everything is falling into place with regards to our ability to use the funding that the board has overseen the procurement of, and to actually start moving forward and paying off all of the people that we need to pay on a regular basis.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So I will look to the committee members for any questions or comments that they have on that. Seeing none, I do have one question in regards to the ministerial approval on the debt limit extension. Is there a specific time frame for the length of time the extension is approved for?
So I will have to defer to Deborah. I'm trying to remember offhand, and I don't have it in front of me, but Deborah might know right off the bat.
Sorry, I can't remember the exact date, but I'm looking it up because I do have the document. If my computer would cooperate with me. Sorry.
So while we're waiting for that, just a confirmation then, the reasoning of requiring the ministerial approval for those who might not have been watching some of our previous meetings was the fact that the commission, being a new entity, has no revenue, therefore we had no borrowing capacity under the Municipal Government Act. Is that correct, Mr. Jankowski?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah.
Excellent. So we require this in order to operate in a debt position and require loans in order to stand the commission up into operations until such a time as we actually have revenue to which we can have an appropriate debt limit applied to the commission. So that's where my question on the time frame of the extension comes from, is just wondering essentially how long they have approved us operating in this manner so that we may get up and running and determine what our actual true debt limit may be.
The debt limit extension for interim financing expires December 31st, 2023. So at that point, then by then, the debt that we've taken on with PD will be secured by the assets that have been transferred into the commission.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Mr. Jankowski, by December 31st, 2023, how long do you think the commission will be in operating status of actually having rolling stock and paying fares?
So our intent is now to actually start operating the regional component of the services and as well as the local component of the services in the 7 municipalities outside of Edmonton by the third or fourth quarter of 2022. The discussion around actual asset transfer has yet to begin. Notionally, the concept that was presented in the business case was that with respect to the assets primarily from the existing municipal operations outside of Edmonton, that those assets would be transferred either prior to or as in conjunction with the start of operations. However, that work is just getting underway. So to give you a concrete answer, while we're hoping that the assets will be in place and transferred to the commission by late 2022, that is work that will have to be, the preparatory work will have to be conducted over the course of the next year, and we may very well be updating that provision.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the committee members on that? Seeing none, then we will move to look for a motion on that. And I'm going to ask if Mr. Finstead would like to make the motion to accept the material and discussion as presented as information.
Thank you. I move the Audit and Finance Committee accept the material and discussion as presented during the update on the EMTSC finance function stand up as information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Finstead. And I will call the question. All those in favor? And there we go. We have a unanimous decision. Thank you very much. Moving on, number 5 of the agenda, endorsement of critical policies. Mr. Jankowski, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you see before you is a request for endorsement of this committee of a debt management policy. And what the debt management policy really seeks to do is to enshrine how the commission will use the debt that we intend to take on to finance 2 key aspects. One is the initial startup costs, as has been discussed already over the course of the last 20 minutes or so. But secondly, also how debt will be used to help finance investment in critical capital infrastructure. So as the corporation, as the commission moves forward, the use of debt to actually finance the acquisition, for example, of new rolling stock, finance the construction of transit facilities, those kinds of things are what the provisions in the debt management policy seek to permit in the fullness of time. While it's not a critical condition of us securing the financing from the TD Bank, it is good policy for a board such as ours to approve for the commission a debt management policy. And the policy that you see in front of you has been developed in reflection of some of the challenges that we've already talked to in terms of this commission being limited in its ability to secure revenue in the early days, and to also permit for the use of debt financing for that capital infrastructure. The policy that you see before you was one of those policies that our legal support team has been instrumental in crafting. So to go back to the earlier discussion around those one-time legal startup costs, this is one of the products where we employed the firm of Shores Jardine to help craft this policy in its current format. So with that, what we're seeking is, provided that the committee is comfortable with this, we're seeking committee endorsement of the policy to move it forward for board approval at the board meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. I'm just going to look to the committee members to see if anybody would like Mr. Jankowski to walk through the policy in a little bit more detail, or if we've all had the opportunity to take a good review of it and are comfortable with the information in which it lies. Does anybody have any need for a full walkthrough of the policy?
I've had an opportunity. I'm not in need myself personally.
Okay. Looks like everybody is okay with that. So excellent. We will now then move it on to any questions, comments, concerns from the committee members. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Jankowski in respect to the policy? Seeing none, then I will ask a question. So under the policy statement number 8, the commission shall adhere to an internal debt limit of 85% of the provincially prescribed debt limit and debt servicing limit. Can you speak a little bit as to how the determination of the 85% was come to, and what the thoughts are around the 15%, I guess, buffer threshold that has been proposed here?
Sure. So you might recall that the original amount of guarantee that has been sought from the cities of St. Albert and of Edmonton, which corresponds also to the amount of debt financing that was applied for with the TD Bank, was in and around $5 million. And that figure was based on the amount that it was a rough estimate of the startup costs that would have to be financed through debt over the course of the first 3 to 4 years of operation. That being said, when we made the application to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, we did seek to provide ourselves with a little bit of buffer, recognizing that we were making the application during the period, as we've discussed with the board, during the period where ridership revenues, for example, and operating costs were significantly impacted by the pandemic that we've endured over the course of the last year and a half. We recognize that the financial picture, and I've spoken to the board about this over the course of the last couple of months, the financial picture that the commission is facing now needs a fairly robust review, which we're undertaking in conjunction with the 8-member municipalities. And that being said, it may very well be that we may need to look at that debt picture again over the course of the next year or so. The $7 million represents a buffer of 15 to 20% over the original estimated $5 million stand-up cost, as was identified through the original business case as carried out over the years of 2018 to 2020. So the 15 to 20% and 15, when you look at this 85%, is that buffer that represents the kind of the difference between the $5 million and the $8 million, the $7 million that the Minister of Municipal Affairs has approved as the debt limit for the commission.
And thank you. So as we get into operational, and we no longer are relying on that, will you look to propose a different debt limit, or do you feel that the 85% will be sufficient even once we have moved into operations?
I think this is something that we will be bringing back to the commission as the commission evolves. The board will have to start thinking, and we all will have to start thinking about the right levels of capital investment as we, for example, start to expand our capital inventory, our fleet inventory, and so on. So I think in the fullness of time, we will need to review this. It may be that the provincially prescribed debt limit may also be adjusted, and at that point we will it would behoove us to look at the 85% limit. Most municipalities, I'm aware, strive to actually be limited at a level significantly below 85%. And ultimately, once this commission gets to a point of financial maturity, operational maturity, I think we will have to look at whether we're able to look at different values for both the debt limit and the prescribed internal debt limit of 85%. So I suspect that this will be something that we will continue to monitor with the new CFO that comes on board, and it's something that we will be bringing back to the committee and to the board on a fairly regular basis for consideration.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll just look to the community to see if there are any other questions. I will have one more after. I see Mr. Finstead, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my comment would be, I think the debt limit won't be a concern for several years, because initially, as assets are contributed to the EMTSC, then the need for taking on debt initially is probably not going to be critical. So it'll be more of just supporting the operations of the entity for the first few years, and until we do need to acquire additional assets or replace certain assets that may be getting close or at their end of useful life.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Finstead. So my last question that I have then to our CAO is, when I look at the wording on the use of debt under application, in item A, it talks about the commission will not make long-term debt obligations to finance current operating expenditures, with the exception of one-time and startup costs incurred before the commission is in full operation. So when I go back to the finance and budget that was presented earlier in this meeting, it speaks of the total one-time and startup expenses, and then it speaks of the total recurring expenses. So can you remind us, is there already municipal contribution that are going towards the total recurring expenses, or are the current recurring expenses being funded by that initial debt? And if so, do we have a wording challenge with the policy as it states that the debt is only to be used for the one-time and startup expenses?
So I'm not sure if I can answer this question exactly the way that it's been posed, but I'll try. The actual to budget finance summary that you saw earlier in the presentation reflected the fact that in 2020 there were no municipal contributions that are that were sought. In future years, as we start operating, particularly with the target of starting operations in late 2022 under the EMTSC banner, we will be seeking the contribution of levies from the 8 participating municipalities. But until that time, the one-time stand-up and the continuously incurred costs will continue to be needed to be debt financed. So for 2022, you might remember that there was a future year outlook that was also presented for the board's consideration prior to my arrival here, and the costs for 2022 and that second category of costs on that table earlier in the presentation were greater for 2022 than in 2021. So those costs will continue to be debt financed. And so for the next 3 years, there will be a significant amount of debt taken on to offset those incurring costs. As the ridership returns, as the level of maturity of the levies that the municipalities will be contributing to this commission reaches the originally prescribed or some revised total number, then it is anticipated that the commission will start to recover both through the levies, through fair revenue, and through non-fair revenue, a larger amount overall than what the ongoing operating costs are. And so at that point, that delta between the sum of those three and the ongoing operating costs will be the amount that we use to repay the debt financing that we're incurring in the first 2 to 3 years of operation. I hope that answers the question, but I'm not exactly.
The way you've explained it is the way I understand it. And so where my concern lies is just in the way that section A under use of debt is written, because it leaves to interpretation the definition of full operation. Some could argue that the commission could be in full operation the second that it was given legal status by the province of Alberta and had the first employee in place. And so knowing that our initial operating expenses are going to be covered by debt until such a time as we are actually delivering transit services, I just have a little bit of concern with the way that is written.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering if there needs to be a revision on that to state, instead of before the commission is in full operation, to something along the lines of before the commission is delivering transit services, or something in and around that.
No, point well taken. So we can certainly take that back, and we can make an amendment to that wording prior to the presentation to the board in 2 weeks' time. We will certainly make a note of that and work with Bill Shores to clarify the point that you're making.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move this to a vote? Excellent. Seeing no others, then I will look for somebody to make the motion in regards to accepting of the policy.
I just want to make a quick note. So this motion is the previous motion. So if we just add at the end, like something as amended or something, we'll put it in the meeting minutes, and then we'll take it offline to update the policy and circulate it to the committee members. That's usually how we've done it previously.
Yep. Oh, I think that sounds great. So whoever would like to make the motion, just please add the as amended after the word approval. Chantel, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will make the motion that the Audit and Finance Committee endorse and recommend the presented critical policies to the EMTSC Board for approval as amended.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that motion. And given that this is a decision item, I will look to see if there's any debate on the matter. Seeing and hearing none, I will then call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Ray, I did not see you vote. Are you frozen? It looks like we may have lost Ray. So we'll just give him a second here to see if he rejoins. Always happens at the most opportune time of the meeting. Haley or Paul, have either one of you had contact with Ray?
I have not.
Neither have I, but I am keeping an eye out for him rejoining. I know his technology was working before, so.
Mhm.
Do we have quorum to be able to motion, or would you like
Yes.
to continue to wait?
No, I believe we would have quorum, so I will go ahead and I will just call that one more time just to make sure that we have the proper vote, since Ray kind of dropped off right in the middle of that. So I will call the question. All those in favor? And we have it as unanimous then. Perfect. Thank you very much. So then with that, we'll move on to item 6 of the agenda, which is the approval of the DJ Consulting contract extension. So Mr. Jankowski, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in addition to some of the contract extensions that were considered by the board directly at its last meeting a few weeks back, one of the things that I wanted to bring forward as well was the extension of the existing contract for financial support services to DJ Consulting. As has been indicated throughout this meeting, Deborah Johnson of DJ Consulting has provided exceptional service to the board and to me in particular over the course of the last month and a half since coming on board. And given that my focus has been over the course of the last 2 months on hiring the first 2 positions of the executive assistant to the senior leadership team and to the board, as well as the director of stakeholder relations. The next position that you will see advertised out there for the EMTSC will be for the director of financial services or the chief financial officer. But it is going to take a couple more months at the very least to secure the right person for that position. And Deborah's contract expired at the end of at the end of May, and she's been providing under that contract, under the total amount approved in the initial contract, the services to the board. My proposal at this point is to continue with the consulting contract to DJ Consulting at the same rates that were approved initially by the board. And I would seek this committee's endorsement of bringing this forward to the board for the board's consideration at its next meeting. You see in front of you as well in your package, the supporting decision note that seeks to extend the contract to, and in the note it says to December 31st, 2021. That will be the end date, but what I would propose is that we continue to use Deborah until such time as we have a permanent CFO and controller in place, and until such time as the appropriate transition is completed between Deborah and the incoming director and CFO. So if the board, if the committee feels comfortable with that, I would seek the committee's endorsement of that and moving that forward to the board for consideration. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And before we move to the questions, I'll just welcome Mr. Shores to the meeting. I see he was able to pop in there, as well as I have heard from our committee member, Ray Ralph. Unfortunately, yes, his computer has shut down, and in his words, things are not looking good. So I'm not sure that we will get him back for the remainder of the meeting. So thank you very much for the presentation in regards to the contract extension. I believe, Mr. Finstead, I saw your hand go up for a question. If you'd like to go ahead.
I do, thank you. I just want to actually lend my support to the motion, believing that should we need to extend the contract beyond December 31st, that would be worthy of another visit by the Audit and Finance Committee at the appropriate time. But I think that doing this extension to the end of the year makes a lot of sense. And again, as Mr. Jankowski mentioned, that she may be required beyond that. But we can certainly look at another extension if that date is rapidly approaching and we still have need for services. So with that, I'm prepared to move that the Audit and Finance Committee approve to extend the agreement dated February 22nd, 2021 between EMTSC and DJ Consulting to December 31st, 2021.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the motion there, Glenn. And just before we go into anything else, just look, Chantel, did you have any questions for Mr. Jankowski on that? Nope, seen him. Perfect. Thank you very much. So again, I too appreciate this information coming forward and would support the continuation with DJ Consulting and with Deborah until such a time as we have a CFO in place and up to speed. I think the support we've received so far has been absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to the continued support that the entire board and in particular the Audit and Finance Committee will receive from Deborah and DJ Consulting until such a time as it is no longer required. So with that, unless I see any debate on the issue, and not seeing that, the motion has been put on the floor by Glenn, and I will call to question all those in favor. And that is carried unanimously. Perfect. So before we move on to adjournment, I will just look to the CEO to see if there is any other closing remarks for the meeting.
The only thing I'd like to do is just thank the committee for its support, ongoing support, and it's great to be working with such a great group. I look forward to continuing the type of relationship that we have through the coming months, and thank you for everything today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to confirm in respect to the critical policy discussion that we had today, that policy will be coming back to the board for the next board meeting here in 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Excellent. Will that be circulated in advance with the amended changes?
Yes, we will strive to do so, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for taking the time this afternoon. We've managed to shave a couple of minutes off of our scheduled agenda, so that is fantastic. It's always good when we can give time back rather than going over. So I appreciate everybody's time today, and we will see you at our board meeting in a few weeks. Take care.
Thank you.